All right, we're going into deep endgame territory, so that means I'm going into webcomic spoilers, of course. So if you don't want to know what's going to happen past what the manga's currently on, I suggest you check out now. All right, so as I said, we're going into deep endgame theory territory here, and I'm pretty sure it involves Dr. Genus and Psykos to a large degree. So first of all, I made a video about Dr. Genus like last year, and I said that he's super important to the series because he is like the main mouthpiece of exposition, essentially. If there's something really important that other characters would have no business understanding or be able to explain, like not even Child Emperor, that's when one brings in Dr. Genus. Because, like, for example, Dr. Genus is literally the only character in the series who was able to figure out that Saitama had removed his limiter. And to this day, besides Zombie Man, he is the only one that still understands that concept. Now, Psykos, on the other hand, has, proven to be super intelligent as well, and she's also an Esper and has all of that other stuff. But the thing that ties these characters together is, you guessed it, God. So as I always say, God is the end game of One Punch Man. He will be the final villain or whatever, the final fight for Saitama, and apparently the final adversary for essentially everyone who's going to be around at the end of the series. And that brings in Dr. Genus and Psykos because they are going to, I guess, figure out what's going on with him and how to defeat him. But before we get to that, let's break down and explain how we're going to get to that point. So Psykos, of course, is, I guess, the character who understands God the most at this point, besides Homeless Emperor and Zombie Ben, and, the former is dead at this point. But Psykos, it all started when she looked into the future using the third eye ability, the very same thing that Shibawa tapped into to be able to see the prophecy that, we've been going off of, essentially the whole series at this point. They basically saw the same thing, more or less. They basically saw that at some point in the future, whether it means that it's literally going to be the future or it's some kind of probability-based thing, unclear at this point, God is going to, destroy all of the humans. He's not going to destroy the Earth because he loves the Earth, obviously, or at least it's implied so far, and it's also possible that he is integrated into the Earth some way. But regardless, we know that he hates the humans, and what they basically saw, in my opinion, is that him just annihilating everyone with, an army of monsters or something like that. It obviously freaked them both out. Shibawa said the Earth is in danger, and Psykos basically had a mental breakdown and made the Monster Association as a result of all of this stuff. And also recently in chapter 132 of the manga, a new addition is that God straight up interacts with Psykos and gives her a little power-up. I say little because obviously it was a continent-shaving thing, but regardless, she knows about God at this point in some way or another, and it's definitely going to get to the point of where I guess she comes to the full realization as to what this being is. Now, also, just like Dr. Genus, who we'll get into, she survives her arc despite being a huge villain and that you think would probably not stick around any longer than that. Because we know after the Monster Association arc wrapped up, Psykos was put into the Hero Association jail because in chapter 98 of the webcomic, we see Fubuki go down and try to interrogate her. And coincidentally, Fubuki is asking her the same questions I am, and all the stuff that I'm talking about here. She says, why did you form the Monster Association? And she says, the ability to see the future, the third eye. You subtly change when you learn that ability. It's about time you will tell me what you saw with that ability. Now, Psykos, of course, freaks out again, and she doesn't say anything. She's like, I don't remember. I can't remember. And then after, the whole Tatsumaki scuffle thing wraps up, we see Fubuki break Psykos out of jail, and she just goes to fly somewhere. And this storyline hasn't been resolved yet, so it's still up in the air as to what's going on. But this is just pointing to Psykos being integral to the story because of her relationship with God. That's why she has, survived at this point, because she's going to come in later on and she's going to be a big player in the final arc, in my opinion. Now, the same exact thing is happening with Dr. Genus. Now, I also said that he is an important mouthpiece of exposition, and that is very true, and he's a great character, one of my favorites, but he survived the whole House of Evolution little mini, thing going on because of his importance to the story, and not just because of the exposition, because of God. He is going to be one of the people that is going to be breaking down and explaining God, and he's essentially going to have a face turn at this point, along with Psykos. They're both going to, kind of be good guys, I guess, at the end of the story, because they're going to be working with the main cast, whoever is that at that point. Whatever it's going to be, there's going to be a round table of all of the smart people. But anyway, back to Dr. Genus. So of course, right now, it's not confirmed 100% that he is aware of the existence of God. And it goes back to the whole thing in chapter 88. Also, this same sequence happens in the webcomic when he's explaining the limiter and everything about it to Zombie Man. And we get that classic line where he says, like, to ensure that we do not enter the realm of where we lose all purpose and reason. He's referring to, like, the power scale, essentially, that's built into this world, into all of the humans. God has set limits to the growth of every being. So when he says God, I always thought that he was just talking about, like, nature and evolution and all of that stuff, just biology in general, like, an analogy for that. I never thought he was, like, literally talking about the being God, that gave Homeless Emperor his powers. But now I just don't know what he's talking about here. There's a chance that maybe he does know about God. I mean, it makes sense, I suppose. If anyone in this universe is aware of this dude, I would put my money on it being Dr. Genus. I mean, he seems to pretty much know everything, right? Now, how does he know about God? I don't know. Also, if we go back to chapter 120 of the webcomic, when Amai Mask gives us the backstory on the world of One Punch Man, this is basically readily available knowledge to everyone because he says you probably learned this in middle school. So Dr. Genus, of course, absolutely knows the history of the world. Also, like, I think he's over 100 years old at this point, so it's possible that he existed, like, when the wars were still going on, maybe, or something like that. I mean, it's never stated, but maybe we'll get more of a backstory to him. But regardless, it's possible that he might know that God, like, was formed as a result of these wars because, My Mask says that, monsters and all of that stuff started popping up, after all the damage that was done. But something that kind of conflicts with this is why would God, put a growth on the humans if he hates them? Like, why would he go through the trouble of doing that? Why wouldn't he just kill them? So I'm thinking that he's not talking about God here, and more so the biology. But let's get into him eventually finding out about God, which I absolutely think he will, because in chapter 107 of the webcomic, when we finally get the reunion between Zombie Man and Dr. Genus, like, he goes to him, he's like, hey, everything you said about Saitama was true, you're the man, hey, remove my limiter. And Dr. Genus is like, nah, This house has a basement too. There's something interesting that I want to show you. Now, I don't know what this means. We can all speculate about what's going on, but it's obviously going to get to the point of where Zombie Man is going to talk to Dr. Genus about God, because as we stated, he's one of the very few characters in the story who's even aware of this being, and it's not a coincidence that he's meeting up with the other smart dude. So I assume that this is all going to come down to, like I said, a meeting of the minds. Dr. Genus is going to be there. Psykos is going to be there. Throw in Child Emperor and throw in Dr. Pufoy if he's still a thing at that point. And we're going to have, like, this team that's going to try to figure out how to take down God. But, like, regardless, it's, of course, going to come down to Saitama, like, punching through, like, the 8th dimension to destroy him or whatever. But maybe they'll have some kind of use outside of that moment, taking down God's disciples or just undoing monstrification in general. Maybe that's what they do, figuring out whatever he had to do with it, possibly. But regardless, I think this is all going to come to fruition, more or less. I think this is the ultimate purpose of these characters. Let me know what you think is going to happen in the comments. What do you think about this theory? If you like the video, guys, if it entertained you, please give it a like. I also have a Patreon that gives you extra weekly Q&A, and if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.